Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you are having a fabulous day already. Y'all, I like to be a little more cleaned up when I come on here. But the truth of the matter is that your girl needs a run, and that's where she's going as soon as she's done. So that means no makeup, hair up. Here we go. So if you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a runner, jazzerciser, line dancer, try to be as active as I possibly can, which is no small task when you work and you have grad school. I am studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, and I am not a counselor yet. I love to make that disclaimer. So just know that if you are watching Wellness Wednesday, most Wellness Wednesdays are based on my own personal lived experience, which I think is one of the most important things that we can share with each other. Sharing our stories, sharing our tips and tricks for what worked, what didn't, gives other people ideas or us ideas on new things to try. Sometimes a wellness journey involves, it's kind of like, and I've been using this phrase a lot and I don't know why, throwing spaghetti noodles at the wall to see what sticks and what doesn't, because everybody's different. So what works for me might not work for you, vice versa. But if we don't share that information, then sometimes we never know these options to try, right? So if you're just stumbling on my page, welcome. If you say hi, please say hi in the comments. Not if you say hi, please say hi in the comments. Let me know you're here. But if I don't respond to you or acknowledge you, it's because Facebook doesn't always like to show me all the things. So it's just because I didn't see it, not because I'm ignoring you. But in any case, I hope you get something out of this video today. And if you have been following me for a while, then hopefully you're here because you have gotten something out of these videos before. And you know that last week we discussed ways to run the day. And it was kind of a play on words because as a runner in the running circle, there's a saying that goes, run the day or it will run you. And I think that applies across the board, whether you're a runner or not, because I definitely can tell you, and there's an ironic little story here. And again, if you're here, let me know you're here. Drop a comment, ask a question. Just please keep it politics free. Ironically, last week I talked about ways to start the morning, and then literally the next day, something happened. I don't know if I woke up late or woke up and wasn't paying attention, but I did the wrong things the next morning. And it was literally the very next day that for the first time in a very long time, my day just started all wrong. But I didn't let it completely deteriorate as the day went. Instead, I went back to what I normally do in the mornings. And I just reset the day and went from there, as opposed to just letting it destroy the day and not doing any of my habits because, I told myself it was already too late or whatever. So that the whole point of that is I cannot iterate enough that this wellness is a process. It is a journey. It is not something I don't think that you achieve and then can never lose. I think it's something you have to work at every single day. For me, it is anyway. So if you missed last week's video, I'll drop the link in the comments. It'll be here on Facebook. Facebook keeps live videos for 30 days. And then you can find it at my YouTube channel, which you can find it usually within a couple hours after I'm live. You can find that day's video on YouTube and all the previous ones as well. So if you watched, I would like to know, did you pick one new thing that I talked about last week to implement just for a week? There was a lot of information, and I always stress, try one new thing. Don't try to overhaul everything. But did you pick one new thing to implement for the week? And did you notice differences, good or bad? Let me know what those were. Drop them in the comments, send me a message, whatever. I would love to know if you took my challenge, and if you got anything out of it. So today, recently, social anxiety has been coming up quite a bit. And social anxiety is something that I have to kind of sword fight with. I fence with social anxiety on a regular basis. And a friend of mine had reached out and asked me to talk to them about how I got over it. And I don't think that was their actual verbiage. I'm trying to remember their actual verbiage. But what I said to them when I got on the phone with them was the fact that you, I think it had something to do with moving through it. And I said, the fact that you recognize that it's not something you get over, that it's something you have to learn to manage or move through is really, really important. And I've talked about social anxiety before, but it's often in the context of other things, like we've talked about imposter syndrome. I can drop the comments for that in the link, self-talk, but not specific to social anxiety. So let's go ahead and dive in, and you're going to hear a story that if you've been following me for a long time, you've heard before. But if you haven't been, it might be new to you. But first, let's start with what is social anxiety and what are the common signs. Let's just get down to the nitty gritty. Good morning, Miss Peggy. Great to see you. So the DSM-5-TR, and again, let me reiterate, I am a counselor in training. I'm not a licensed counselor. So I could break out the DSM and I could just read you all the details, and that would be incredibly boring for some of us and incredibly exciting for others, and it would take way too much time. So bottom line is that the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Psychological Disorders, I don't think that's what they're calling it anymore. It's the diagnostic manual that's used by counselors. And I want to specify disorder. There's a reason, so hang on to that for a minute. Is the marked persistent fear of social or performance situations that might subject you to someone else's scrutiny, judgment, or embarrassment by others. It is not the same as shyness, which is a personality trait. But sometimes it's hard to know the difference. Good morning, Miss Dawn. So symptoms of social anxiety disorder are intense fear, which the fear is generally out of proportion to the actual existing threat. Avoidance behaviors, physical symptoms like blushing and trembling and rapid heart rate. And one thing, honestly, nausea. One thing that I didn't notice mentioned anywhere, but I think my consensus has been in talking to people that a lot of people experience it, but it somehow doesn't make the list, is dry mouth. It's like when our fight or flight, well, now it's like 4 things. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When that gets activated, a lot of times one of the first things we experience is dry mouth. At least I do. And I've talked to several people that do, but it never seems to make the list. So just know that can be a symptom as well. But to be diagnosed with a disorder, you need to be demonstrating a lot of these symptoms for at least 6 months or more. And it needs to be causing significant distress or impairment, which basically means it's interfering with your daily functioning. It can be hereditary, and but it can also be caused by environmental or stress factors. I would say that lots of anxiety runs in my family, and social anxiety is more than likely part of that, and it can exist on its own. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have anxiety to have social anxiety, but I feel like everybody that I've talked to that has it also has general anxiety or depression. So I think it's often comorbid, and it does often go in hand with anxiety disorders and obsessive compulsive disorder, ADHD, body dysmorphic disorder, bipolar disorder, and substance abuse disorder. So a lot of times these are comorbid things that kind of go hand in hand. And a lot of times people don't go for treatment for social anxiety. They go for treatment for something else, and that's when the social anxiety is identified as part of that problem. So you might be thinking to yourself right now, okay, lady, you are on Facebook Live talking about this. I see you everywhere on Facebook. How can you tell me that you have social anxiety? I have really realized that was as much of a problem for me as it was until I had what I like to refer to as the meltdown. That was probably the biggest visible meltdown that I had, and it was back around 2004 or 2005. So my daughter was, I want to say 11 or 12. I can't do simple math right now in my head. But that sounds about right. and she was at her best friend's house, and I was to go on my first date in a very long time with someone I knew. It wasn't like it was a blind date. It wasn't, anything like that. I was to go on my first date in a very long time, and it was going to be on the same street. Her best friend lived on a cul-de-sac, which you know what that means. I don't have to explain that. And this was going to be a date at a bonfire down the street where a lot of people that I knew from work were going to be. And the meltdown looked like me in the entryway, or what we call the foyer of their house, dressed in 3 layers of clothing because it was cold, because bonfire, just freaking out on numerous levels, circling, walking in circles, pacing, heart racing, dry mouth, crying intermittently, asking out loud, what was I thinking? I can't do this. How can I get out of this cul-de-sac without anybody seeing me? And literally just in my own world of brain spin and physical spin and all of the things, shaking, crying, just probably not much short of an actual full-blown panic attack in front of my daughter at impressionable ages and her best friend. And this was not the first time. It was simply probably the most vivid example that I can give. There were other times after and before where those things were, like I said, just less visible. They were, nobody else saw them because I was really good at hiding them. Step outside and have these little meltdowns in a way that nobody could ever see them. But this was full blown in their faces. And when reality struck and I realized that my daughter and her best friend were watching this and I was setting an example, basically, I froze and I kind of stopped and I kind of got myself under control. But they had to do a lot of talking and a lot of feeding during this time to tell me that I didn't have anything to worry about and it was all going to be okay. And I'm not sure they totally understood what I was experiencing in that moment. So let me break this down a little bit. For me, a lot of times the social anxiety was not with a group of strangers. A group of strangers, I think in my brain, and there were little mind games I would play with myself when it came to a group of strangers. And when I was talking to my friend the other day, they kind of echoed this sentiment. A group of strangers, you could ask me to speak to them about a subject matter. If it was something I knew, I could get up on the fly, give the conversation. I would get a little red in the face. I would get a little shaky. No one else would really see it, but I could do it without really too much of a problem. But when it came to people that I was going to see on a regular basis, that was a huge problem. I actively practiced avoidance behaviors. The job that I was in, I had a lot of colleagues. It was a member-driven organization. A lot of times they got together after meetings or they hung out in the same places. And when my boyfriend would be like, hey, let's go here, I'd be like, oh, no, we can't go there because that's where so-and-so hangs out and that's where so-and-so hangs out. And it was literally like just this constant monologue in my head that if I saw these people out in public, they were going to judge me. If I had to speak to these people in front of these people, that they were going to judge me. And that's exactly what happened that night. Was there were going to be, I liked these people. It's not that I didn't like these people. It's that I was constantly in a brain spin about what they were thinking about me, what they were going to say, what they thought about something that came out of my mouth. It was a continuous cycle in my head all of the stinking time. And if I had to get up in front of them and speak to them at a meeting, or in this instance, this was my separate personal life that was now getting integrated, and I didn't like that. It was a problem. It was a huge problem. I played paintball with some of these same people and literally sat in my vehicle. And as soon as I saw a truck drop off someone I knew that I didn't know was going to be there, it was the same experience. It was just quieter, and it was in my vehicle where nobody could see it. And it was me going in circles. How do I get out of here without anybody seeing me? I can't do this. And here's the bottom line. I'd love to tell you that there's some magical thing that works, that makes this stop. But for me, a lot of times, the fear of letting someone down or embarrassing myself by bailing, if that makes sense, or not following through with what I said I was going to do, which kind of goes back to that letting someone down. A lot of times that's what helped me to muscle through, because in my brain, running away was what I wanted to do, but running away was going to make it worse. Whatever I perceived was going to happen, embarrass myself, let someone down, whatever I perceived was going to happen was going to be not as bad as bailing or letting someone down or running away from it. And so that is a lot of times what forced me to kind of muscle through it, was the fear of compounding the problem I was already having. Like they might judge me, or I'm about to give them a reason to judge me by bailing. Does that make sense? If you've been in that situation before, it probably does make sense. I just don't know how else to explain it. So how did I stop? Well, that was part of how it stopped. A lot of times I would end up muscling through, and then what it would look like before and after would be, if I had to speak in front of a group, or go do something I hadn't done before that I wanted to do, but I was scared of. A lot of times what it would look like is a lot of pacing beforehand, a lot of high heart rate, dry mouth, stress symptoms, pacing, repeating things, over rehearsing what I was going to say to the point where it sounded like I was reading, because it was so memorized and so rigid that, because I was so terrified of making a mistake. And then afterwards, office or going into the bathroom or going into some separate place and just dumping with tears to rid myself of the stress. And I didn't realize how far back it went until I saw old pictures of me from 2001 where I distinctly remembered it was like one of my first events at my job that we had to dress up. And I remembered the conversation. When I saw the picture, I remembered the conversation that went on before, and it was, "Hey, Donna, come over here. Let me get your picture standing up against the wall because your dress is beautiful." And instantly I felt hot, and I felt embarrassed, and I felt singled out. And I was like, no, we don't need any pictures of me. I'm just going to stay right here. And I really tried to get out of that. And when you look at the picture, and I think it's actually on my Facebook somewhere, you can see that from here up, I am beet red because I was hot and I wanted out of there. I did not want my picture taken. So it was basically anytime I got singled out, a lot of times when pictures were being taken of me, if I had to get up and speak in front of somebody. And again, it was always much worse when it was people that I knew versus people that I didn't know. So like I said, even though a lot of times I learned to muscle through some of it, and that's just what I call it, muscling through. I learned to muscle through some of it without it really being evident. If somebody was paying attention, they could see my hands shaking at the podium, or they could see my whole body shaking. I think I stopped turning red after a while. I could kind of tell by how warm I felt if I was red or not. But it would be the pacing and the nervous preparation and the 50,000 scenarios of what might happen and how I would react in my head beforehand. And then the stress dump afterwards, the sitting down in my chair and crying, or hiding in the bathroom and crying. And I just didn't know the tools. I didn't realize until the incident in front of my daughter, I didn't realize that I had social anxiety or how bad it was until I started looking backwards. So I didn't seek help for it. I didn't know anything about free support groups. The one that I had been in had dissolved. I didn't know NAMI offered free support groups. I don't think my insurance covered mental health at the time. I was like, I got to figure this out because I'm by myself. I'm totally alone. How many of us feel like we're totally alone in situations like this? And I got to figure it out. So how did I stop? Well, again, we talked about the muscling through, rationalizing embarrassment, that whatever I thought was going to happen in that moment of doing the thing was way less embarrassing than what it was going to look like if I bailed or ran away or didn't follow through. So that was a lot of it. And then when I was in college studying for my bachelor's, I had to choose a paper topic from like a list of 6 or 7 things. And what I chose was mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I knew what cognitive behavioral therapy was. I knew what cognitive therapy was, but I had never heard of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I was curious about it, did a little poking around, saw that it was a newer treatment for depression and also being used for anxiety. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I learned so much. And one of those things that I learned was when I had these thoughts in my head, about what other people were thinking or what other people were going to do, that I needed to not let them take over. That just because they were in my head didn't make them true. And we've talked about that before too. And I found an article. There's an article written by someone with a master's and a doctor, and then somebody else with a doctorate, that talks about a lot of this. It's kind of a general overview, and I'm going to drop it in the comments. But things that I learned from mindfulness-based activities was to challenge my negative thoughts and about assumptions. Assumptions are big because when we are experiencing anxiety, especially social anxiety, we have certain thinking styles that are just, they're feeding that, they're fueling it. That's basically like taking a wood pile covered in gasoline and flicking a match at it, okay? And those thinking styles are mind reading. We assume we know what other people are thinking, and that they see us in a negative way, or in the same negative way that we see ourselves. So you see where self-talk becomes an issue. Having names to put to these thinking styles. Fortune telling, which is predicting the future, which is us assuming the worst is going to happen and then going through 50,000 scenarios about how it's going to look when it does. You just know that things are going to go bad. You know you're going to do horrible, and you're making yourself anxious before it even gets a chance to happen. And my experience has been that in all those 50 billion scenarios that I've built in my head for every single one of those situations, they've all been negative. And I can pretty well guarantee you that none of them have ever actually happened. So how much time and energy was I wasting, and how much was I getting myself riled up for something that was never actually going to happen? Catastrophizing, or I don't think I pronounced that right, but blowing things out of proportion, and thinking that if somebody notices that we're nervous, it's like the end of the world. And then personalizing, which is assuming that people are looking at us and focusing on us in a negative way. I can tell you about a day that I agonized over my hair for 2 hours because I thought there was something wrong with it, and I was having a terrible time. And I walked out the door, and like the very first person I saw was like, "Oh, I love your hair today. It looks fabulous." And I'm like, what? It was literally like that all the time, whatever I put on. And it was always worse when I was going to see people that I knew, except for the handful of people that I was really super comfortable with. I sell activewear, y'all. Selling activewear means being visible all the time. And it also meant going to conventions that were full of women. Now, I'm a woman. I'm constantly judging myself. So what am I assuming that other women are doing? Judging me. And so getting ready to go, I never regretted a conference, and I always had fun at these conferences, but getting ready to pack and preparing to leave to go to these conferences was the same thing. But it was worse because it was a bunch of strangers that I kind of knew through social media, but that were also all women and all going to judge me. I was absolutely convinced, and I would have to catch myself and just be like, Donna. Even after the second or third time I went, it was a shorter conversation with myself beforehand, but it was still always a conversation. So my point here is it doesn't go away. You learn to manage it. Even now, I just had an event update, and I'm like, okay, do I have to? I know these people. There's no question about it, Dawn. I've definitely grown from the person I was 20 years ago. And those freakouts, those meltdowns, they're much quieter. That's what it looks like now. It's much quieter, and it's much shorter, and it's easier for me to deflect and go, knock it off. I see where you're going, knock it off, because I have awareness. I have the awareness to say, oh, I see where this is going. I'm headed into the spiral. And now it's just more about talking myself into leaving the house when there's some kind of a social event going on, and I haven't left the house in like 4 days, and I'm comfortable here, and I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. That means I have to take a shower. Listen, I shower every day, y'all. It means I have to put on makeup. It means, what am I going to wear? And it starts, and then I have to, but I see it starting and I know what it is. And sometimes I have to make myself go, because when I recognize that, I am just not wanting to leave my comfort zone, that it's not because I don't feel good. It's not because I don't feel that I have the mental capacity to have a conversation. That is just because I don't wanna. That's not healthy. And that I have to sometimes force myself to do these things, because the longer I stay home and say, I don't wanna, so I'm not gonna, the more I feed that. All right. So if you didn't know I had social anxiety, there's the big shocker. So where do we start? According to the experts, the first place to start is by self-education. A lot of times this is our nervous system giving a false alarm because it's reacting as if there's a threat when there's not. And in our brain, because we have low self-esteem, because we have negative self-talk, because we have a lot of other things that go on, we make assumptions, and we try to control what's going to happen and what people are going to say and what people are going to do. And we can't do that, but it makes us feel as if there's a threat. And our bodies react as if there's a far bigger threat. You'd think we were being chased by a bear, y'all, because that's how our nervous system responds. So we have to learn that that's what that is, because learning about it is the first thing, is the first step towards awareness, so that we can be like, oh, okay, this isn't really a threat. Is this going to matter in 5 minutes? Is this going to matter? That's the first thing that the experts recommend. And then, I know you guys hear me say this a lot, but literally everywhere you look when you're looking at social anxiety symptoms and how to overcome it, they will specifically say over and over and over again, okay? The common ground is, while it may not overcome it, one of the things that you can to help overcome it is diet and exercise, lifestyle changes. And I know if I have too much caffeine, I'm like this, I'm like vibrating, okay? And that means that I am much more likely to perceive things as a personal attack, or somebody judging me, or, somebody looks at me funny and I'm like, oh, they're giving me the side eye. I personalize things much more when my anxiety is up. So I have learned to know what ramps it up and to stay away from those things. So diet and exercise definitely helps. You guys have heard me talk about this before. That was kind of where my journey with controlling my anxiety started, was when I started running with a friend and I started feeling a little better. And then I started changing my diet to feed the running. And then I started feeling even better. And so this was a gradual thing for me. So education, lifestyle changes, mindfulness, breathing exercises, grounding, those things all help. I wish I would have known about all these things before all these little massive and mini meltdowns, because if I could have just learned how to breathe properly beforehand, it probably would have made all the difference, or at least would have taken the edge off. Gradual exposure. Gradually exposing yourself, which is essentially what I was doing. Gradually exposing yourselves to those situations that you fear, make a huge difference. And then what you do in that situation is you start collecting evidence. And y'all have heard me talk about this before too. Our brains make up a story. It's either good or it's bad. And then because our brain has this on our radar, red car effect, we go out, or confirmation bias, it's also known as, we go out and we find things subconsciously that confirm that thought. So if that thought is bad, if that thought is, my life is cursed and my day is going to suck, before we even walk out all day long. But if our if our attitude going into a speaking engagement or a social event is, everybody's going to judge me, I look terrible, I'm not dressed right, those are the things that our brain is going to look for confirmation on. However, if we walk into the day saying it's going to be a great day, I'm going to be productive, this is going to be a fabulous social event, I can't wait to make some new contacts, see some of these people, your brain looks for evidence or confirmation of whatever's going on in your head, whatever you're telling yourself. So that's what I mean by evidence. And that's one of the best things I did for myself, was start an evidence file, because I have evidence tabs. I have like file cabinets full of negative evidence of how I suck and all those things in the back of my head. That evidence needs to be like shredded, burned, whatever. So I started keeping an evidence file, especially with grad school, because that, writing ramps up my anxiety. And I tend to be very perfectionistic about it. I had to start an evidence file. I literally started a physical evidence file on my computer where I take professor feedback, I copy and paste it to a Word document and stick it in that file. So that when I start to freak out about a paper or have self-doubt where I'm like, am I even in the right field? Should I even be doing this? Why am I doing this? Because I don't understand. You know what I mean? And I start in that spiral. You hear it, right? I can go to that evidence file and read all the wonderful things my professors have said about me to remind myself of why I'm on the path I'm on. So, gradual exposure and evidence. Fidget tools. If you've got a lot of extra nervous energy, listen, fidget tools weren't a thing that I knew of 20 years ago. Thank you, Dawn, for reminding me that was 20 years ago. But for some people, they work. These calm strips. I had one laying around here somewhere. Calm strips that have like a texture so that you can rub them. I don't know if that would work for me. I've never tried it, but it does work for a lot of people. And that's one of the things that the experts recommend. And then self-talk. The experts talk about it. I talk about it. Can either be the most damaging or the most enlightening thing that we experience. I can't stress it enough. And when we are telling ourselves negative things, whether we have general anxiety, whether we have social anxiety, whatever it is that we have, depression, whether we don't have the disorder, but we have some of the symptoms of it, and it's not disrupting our day or our function, but it's weighing heavily on it. What we tell ourselves up here has so much power. So what's working for me out of the things the experts said? Well, we kind of talked about this, self-talk. I just got on there. Thinking change, and I talked about that a little bit, the thinking styles, and I am going to drop the link to that article in the comments sometime after I'm done. It might not be right away because, again, your girl needs a run. Awareness of my avoidance behaviors, and I touched on that a few minutes ago. When I know that there's not really any reason to not go somewhere, the longer I spend time at home, the less likely I am to want to leave. It's that simple. And that I know is some of that social anxiety, being comfortable where I'm at, not wanting to deal with other people, other emotions, the wondering, the whatever. But because through my mindfulness, I have become more aware of that. I make it a point to make sure I'm leaving the house at least once a week. And I have to really, if I don't want to go to something, I have to really examine myself, like a mixer. I have to really examine myself and go, why don't you want to go? Do you not want to go because you're not feeling good? Do you not want to go because, good morning, Miss Denise, because you don't feel like you have the mental bandwidth? Or do you just not want to go because you don't want to deal with people? And if it's that last answer, or if it's because I'm just comfortable and I don't wanna, and I've been home for a week and haven't been anywhere, guess what Donna needs to do? Donna needs to get up and go, so that she's not feeding that social anxiety and that avoidance behavior. Avoidance behaviors are huge, and they fuel, and they're like the one thing that we can really change the most. So awareness of the avoidance behaviors and not giving into the I don't want to go tantrum is huge for me. And I know that. And that awareness, say good morning already, that awareness that that's what I'm doing is practicing avoidance. Good morning, Victoria. That is huge. That's probably the biggest thing is, okay, you don't really have any legitimate reason not to go. So you need to go. And a lot of times I get dressed for an event and I'm all ready to go. And then I'm like, do we have to? So I've just learned, and it's taken a long time to recognize when that's what's happening. And I try not to give into it. We talked about evidence. And then the other thing that really helps me, and this can work for anybody depending on what your beliefs are, faith really helped me view myself differently and stop with a lot of that negative self-talk. And it also helps me to calm down. To be clear, it didn't make it go away, but it helped me manage it better. And it helps me to take steps even when I feel like I'm not ready to. Because y'all, if we wait until we're ready, we're never going to be ready to do anything, to take any kind of a step outside of our comfort zone. So that's what's working for me. So my challenge to you is to, and not everybody has social anxiety. And just to be clear, just to be clear, you can have the symptoms and you can be a little bit higher functioning in this department where you manage it, not because you're managing it, but because you're just making it look really good to everybody else. And it can still be interfering with your own personal function. If you're turning in circles in your bedroom for 3 hours before an event because you are afraid that everybody's going to judge you or that something's going to happen that's going to single you out, then it's really important that you pay attention to that, because just because you're hiding it from somebody else doesn't mean that it's not interfering with your function. So my challenge is to you is take a look at these things and just maybe, again, even if you don't experience social anxiety, or even if it's, you have a few of those symptoms, but you're able to muscle through them like I was, take a look at these things that are recommended, like self-talk, lifestyle, and see if there's something you can start, a habit that you can add that will just help across the board, because most of these things that are recommended by the experts, they are also applicable to any other kind of anxiety. Simple things like just learning to breathe, learning breathing exercises, etc. Yes, Denise, I understand that. And I can't read your whole response, but I will when I'm done. But yes, it seems like that a lot of that, I have the same problem with getting gung-ho. And I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of times I would be gung-ho, and then a lot of times what would stop me is, it's not going to turn out that good. It was that fear that it would, of what it would look like when it was done, that I wasn't capable of making what I envisioned happen. And a lot of times that would stop me. That's why I can't sew to this day. That's why I can't sew. That's a story for another day. But to wrap this up, my challenge to you, just pick one of these techniques that seem to overlap with every single thing I talk about, which is, like I said, mindfulness. That's the easiest thing. Breathing exercises, grounding, adjusting your self-talk, just educating yourself, because that's the start. So my challenge to you is to find something that'll work for whatever you're experiencing, whether it's social anxiety, regular anxiety, just a stressful period, whatever, and find one of these things that might work for you to help to kind of reframe that and make it look a little bit differently, or help you manage it. So remember these things. Be patient, because you can't fix this overnight. We didn't get, again, I can't stress this enough. It's just about anything. We didn't get here overnight. We can't fix it overnight. Start with self-awareness, paying attention to when you feel extra ramped up and extra stressed, and what your thought process is that's going on when that's happening. And remember, again, you don't have to have a disorder to experience some of these symptoms. And because you're experiencing some of these symptoms does not mean you have a disorder. But if it's interfering with your daily function and you feel like you need help, seek help. Talk to your primary care physician. A lot of times, true social anxiety disorder cannot be dealt with without either therapy or medication, or both. If you don't want medication, talk to your doctor about referring you to a therapist. I'm not anti-medication, but it's not for me. My system is very sensitive, so I try to avoid pharmaceuticals whenever possible. But if it's causing you distress, or it's interfering with your normal function, it's okay to seek help. It's also okay to say, listen, I think I need medication, or no, I don't want medication. Can you refer me to a therapist? There are groups, there are that are free. There are many providers that take cash pay, which is sometimes less than if you had insurance, if your insurance doesn't cover it, or you don't want it to go there. But if you need help, seek help. Even if it's talking to a friend and saying, hey, I have this problem and I have it a lot. If that friend can affirm that some of these thoughts you're thinking, correctly affirm that some of these thoughts you're thinking are thoughts that maybe you shouldn't be paying attention to. But when I say correctly affirm, I don't mean, you're being stupid, don't think like that. That's not affirming. I can understand why you might feel that way, but I don't know of anybody that's ever said anything like that about you, or you know what I mean? Somebody that'll help you build evidence against those negative thoughts, and in favor of those positive ones. So again, if it's causing you distress, if it's interfering with your normal function, fine, get help, seek help. It's okay. And it doesn't mean you're going to be diagnosed with a disorder. And it also doesn't mean you won't. It means you're seeking help, and the label doesn't matter if you know that you need help. That's what it means. The label doesn't matter. We put way too much emphasis on these labels. Okay, that's all I have to say today. I hope that was helpful. It was a little bit long, but this is an important topic for me. And I know that there's kernels in here, even if you don't experience social anxiety, there's kernels in here that can help anybody. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. I am going to go run to settle my anxiety. And in the meantime, just be well.